Welcome back to the Manor, Entropians. Julian McBain here, and today we are going to be back on the hunt at Royal Club. That's right, we're back on Calypso, as I'm sure those of you who watched my vlog saw yesterday. And so we're going to start cleaning up some of these Codex challenges. I'm only 2 ranks away from finishing up Barryclad, so I would like to do that. So that's where we're going to start. Okay, so today we're going to be talking about a philosophical topic for a change. It's been a while since I've talked philosophy and modern, changes to modern theory. And so I'm kind of excited to be getting into a topic like that. But before we get started, if you're new to the channel, welcome to the Manor. Please take a moment and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, 1 subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Also, if you are someone who has enjoyed my work, please consider becoming a patron. Go to patreon.com/JulianMcBain. Okay. So this is something that's actually been on my mind because I've been watching the new Star Trek Picard. And the Borg, of course, feature prominently in Star Trek Picard. And there's always been an interest in my mind on cyborgization. And I'm sure that many of you have listened to the segments that I did on human digitization and pouring the brain into a computer, brain mapping, things of that nature. This kind of takes it the other direction. Instead of turning us into a computer or pouring our personality into a computer, what if we were to take the wetware, our bodies, and augment them with cybernetics? And this is something that I know has been experimented with. It's been tried. It's still extremely rudimentary. We're not ready to really start this in earnest yet. There have been some successful attempts. We have what the heck is his name? He's the first recognized cyborg, legal cyborg in Canada. And keeping in mind he did this before the Enchroma glasses were a thing, he implanted an antenna into himself so that he could hear color because he's colorblind. So, and there's a term for that. And I can't remember what it is. I'm going to try to look it up while I'm fighting here. Oh, it's synesthesia. When you hear color. Oh, hey, my cat leveled up. And now my cat can bow. That's pretty cool. So he used cybernetics to give himself synesthesia in order that he can... Well, it's actually the opposite of it. He gave sound a color. Or he gave color a sound, as opposed to giving sound a color. But in doing so, he overcame his color blindness. And I don't know what it's like because only one person's ever done it. And I have to admit, the contraption itself, the implant itself looks really strange. I mean, we're not used to humans having antennas sticking out of the back of your head and flipping over in front of your eyes. And I'm not saying that to rag on him. That's literally what it is. And it is something that is very difficult to process at first. But I noticed that after watching part of a speech, it just became normal. It's like, okay, this is a thing. Whatever. And it might be because I'm used to adapting to stuff like that, to individual, for lack of a better term, individual quirks. And it's like, you also have the guy who's known as the Iborg, who one of his eyes went blind, so he replaced it with a camera that can record about 3 minutes worth of video before it overheats. Frankly, it's primitive. It's definitely more proof of concept than final product, but he dared to try. And so I find that very cool. And it doesn't go to his brain. We're still working on that, and actually we've had some success with ocular implants to replace to solve for blindness. But it does allow him to use a disability to advantage. And so I find that to be very interesting. And of course, we've got other cybernetic experiments like bionic limbs you can control by linking them directly to the nerves of the arm. And those have seen quite a bit of success. They're still in their early phases, and they're still prohibitively expensive. So this would not be an elective surgery. Because if you're going to elect to have cybernetics implanted, you want them to provide some sort of an advantage, not a disadvantage. And even the most advanced cybernetic limbs, the dryware, are very, very primitive by comparison to where we will eventually be. And I'm not saying that to throw shade at the scientists and the robotics experts and the engineers who create them. But as humans, we've developed a wealth of science fiction material, much of which has become science fact in the last 20 to 30 years. Okay, I mean, hell, my cell phone is more powerful than what they expected the Starship Enterprise to have in the next generation. My little phone has more computing power than the theoretical computer on the Starship Enterprise D. Because at the time, we couldn't imagine how much computing power would be required. We now have voice-activated computing. It's fairly primitive. It's not up to Star Trek levels, but it's getting there. And so, of course, cybernetics is going to be part of that conversation. We've already got people who are embedding RFID chips with all their information into it under their skin. And they function relatively well. So you go to pay for your coffee, you just put your arm up against the payment machine, it buzzes, and you're good. Now, I'm not sure especially since this is currently still a do-it-yourself kit, from what I understand, I'm not ready to cut my arm open and shove a chip that's about the size of a grain of rice up there. I'd want to hire a doctor to do that and find out, the potential complications, rate of infection. There's stuff to do. Like, I don't know where all my arteries, capillaries, and veins run. It'd be my luck I'd do it in the wrong way, and bleh, there I am dead on the floor trying to shove a chip in my arm. But I do think it's coming. And there was one guy who, and you can find all this on Wikipedia under the term cyborg. If you look up cyborg and look at real attempts at cyborgization, someone injected a bundle of 100 neurons, cybernetic neurons, into his arm, which mapped itself on appropriate neurons in the arm, so that he could control a robotic arm remotely through the internet. He is now internet capable. And this gets better, because his wife also had a bundle of neurons shot into her arm, and now they can sense each other's emotions to a certain extent. I don't know how it works, and I don't know how detailed it is. Like, it might just be a generalized idea of mood. But holy crap, that's huge. And of course that brought up the idea of the Borg, who are cybernetic. They're basically cybernetic life forms. They're cyborgs, hence the name Borg. And the difference between a Borg and what we think of as a cyborg is, when we say cyborg, we think individual with cybernetic implants, whereas the Borg work on a hive mind, a collective, and don't have from what I can tell, they don't have individual thought. I believe that when they initially came up with the Borg, the idea was for the hive mind to be, or the collective to all operate together, kind of almost in a consensus format, which realistically would not happen. And so, of course, they came up with the Borg Queen, which then turned them into an actual hive mind. Although it looks like certain Borg have a certain amount of autonomy. I really don't know the complexities of Borg culture, and Star Trek is famous for kind of not bothering itself with too many of the details. So yeah, that's been on my mind lately, and I've been trying to figure out that if, like, I'm all for being a test subject for cyborgization. I have my limits. I would not want the color detecting antenna. One, I'm not colorblind, and two, I would find it very awkward to have that sticking out of my head, especially since I wear equipment that it would interfere with. I am not against the idea of someone having it. That is not the type of experiment I would want done on me for several reasons. You know, you can't wear a fencing mask with that antenna. Or it would have to be specialized. There's too much risk of damaging the implant if you're fighting. And fighting is a key part of my life, except right now because, you know, social distancing. Okay. There we go. And so, thinking about it, I would want the more subtle subdermal implants, I think. I would be willing to have something that shows if it has a purpose, and if it was relatively subtle, and if it could stand the impact from a rapier. Because I'm not going to do something that's going to stop me from fighting. Under no circumstances will I put myself in a situation that will deliberately take me off the field. So, what do you do? I do believe that an RFID chip is eventually going to be common. You put your arm up to the door, it unlocks the door. Or you just walk close enough and it unlocks the door. Similar to how you now keep your key fob in your pocket for your vehicle, and when you walk up to the car, it unlocks itself. Usually you have to pull, or at least with my vehicle, you have to pull the handle once, but it works on the same idea of a personal area network. Which I know is probably an outdated term. I got the term from Metal Gear Solid a million years ago, but that's literally what it is. It's a network in your personal area. And so, even if that's not the current correct term, it's a functional term that works for the sake of this conversation. So you've got the RFID chip. You've got implants that link themselves to your neurons so you can control things remotely. That I see being a thing. I also see it being not 100% subdermal. I could totally see there being, like, if you have that subdermal implant on your neurons, there would be a chip or something that shows up on the back of your hand so you could essentially, not Bluetooth to a thing, or though maybe Bluetooth, but so that you could marry your neurons to the device you're going to be controlling. So I could see that happening. But we may not need to do that because of how far... Oh, wow. I gained health. Holy crap. Because of how far we've come with, like, Wi-Fi connectivity, I don't see that as being strictly necessary. I do think that any implant has to be able to interact with a device if you're going to control it remotely with at least 100 megabits per second. and preferably closer to 500 megabits per second for it to be smooth. And I say that just because of the state of the way we run things like online gaming. 100 megabits is fairly smooth, but keep in mind that our brains only process at a rate of about 30 frames per second, maybe 35. And that's our visual cortex, from what I understand. Now, I'm not an expert. I could be incorrect about that, but I believe I read that our brains process somewhere between 30, 35, 40 frames per second, which is why a 60 frame per second monitor or computer capability is all you really need for it to be absolutely smooth, because that's faster than your brain can process. So your brain's not going to see the difference beyond a certain point. Now, obviously, there are going to be individual differences. There are going to be exceptions to the rule. And what one study shows as being 30 frames per second, the way they're thinking of frames may differ from the way actual frames on a screen work. So I'm not going to take that as gospel. There was a point to going that direction. Oh boy, my brain just totally did a whoop. Lost the track, hang on. Cyborgization, developing things, increased technology, internet connectivity. Megabits per second versus frame rate. We still don't know enough about the brain to know what its true capabilities are. And that's a fact. We don't know shit about our brains. And so the feedback from cybernetics is something that we're going to have to learn how to process. And it might all be built in there. We just don't know yet. Now, I do think it's something that we will achieve. I guarantee I'll see it in my lifetime. I'm only 36. I'll see it in my lifetime. Now, how far into my lifetime, I make no guarantees. That, of course, brings up a subject that I brought up when I was talking about human digitization, and that's morality. Because guaranteed, the first thing that's going to happen, we become cyborgs, or we have people that become cyborgs, and then they're going to be facing discrimination. Depending on what implants they have, especially. If they're super subtle and a person can't tell you're a cyborg, they're not going to know the difference. But people fear change. And the idea of human and machine interaction, even though it's all over science fiction, it's extremely rare as scientific fact. Just look at people who have actual prosthetics and see the difference in the way people treat them as compared to someone who does not require prosthetics. And then you'll see what we're in for as we develop into cyborgization. And I'm not saying it's right. In fact, quite the opposite. It's not right. But it's something that we do have to contend with, and we can't run from it. We have to understand and believe that we can contend with those challenges as we move forward, and we need to contend with them as we run into them, and not wait until they become a major issue. Because cyborgization's coming. There may even come a time when we are able to link our minds together in a collective like the Borg. And to me, that's an extremely scary thought. Because the idea of having voices in your mind constantly, not your inner monologue, you're supposed to have an inner monologue, but just other people's voices in your mind, and you can't shut them out. And then eventually you become dependent on those voices, and then you, if you're ever separated from it, let's say there's a short in the net, you don't know what to do with yourself. You're too used to having the voices. You're too used to hearing the thoughts of other people. You don't have the capability of independent thought anymore. Frankly speaking, the closer we get to becoming cyborgs, the more cyborg we can become, the closer to the Borg we will become. And I think that's the point where you move too far. There will be times when being able to link together in a neural net will be advantageous. This is especially true when working on problem solving. If you can put 5 brains together, link them all together in a network, and have them all working on the same problem, and able to retain focus, then obviously they're going to do a lot better than any individual brain or any interaction where it's not direct neural link, because you'll actually be able to understand each other fundamentally, because you're literally sharing thought. At the same time, I also feel it's incredibly dangerous to be able to do that, because at some point, where is it that will turn into a loss of individuality? So there's a line somewhere. I don't know exactly where that line is. And I don't know if we'll find out where the line is before we cross it without realizing it. But there is a line. And my hope is we can figure out where that line is before it's too late, so that we can continue to develop the idea of cyborgization and elective prosthetics, adding components to ourselves to make ourselves better. But then again, there are no guarantees. It's funny. It's almost a contradiction. No, 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 no. It's almost a contradiction, because I want to go there, but I understand how fundamentally dangerous it is to go there. And that we have to be willing to draw the line. That we have to be willing to look at things and say, this is where the line needs to be. I'm one of those people who wants to try the new thing, but at the same time, I'm cautious about it. It's like, okay, let's make a small change, figure out what the overall effect is. Did that go well? Okay, let's move on to the next step. How is that doing? Let's go on to the next step. Let's find the data. Let's figure out what's going on. Let's try the thing, but be aware we might have to roll it back. And err on the side of rolling it back rather than erring on the side of keeping it. With cyborgization, it's even harder, because once you implant something, you can't take it out. Or you can, but only at great risk, at least right now, to the person who the implant is going into. And then what if they don't want it unimplanted? Is it right for you to forcibly take it out of them? No. At the same time, if we realize that something is over the line, and the person doesn't want to get rid of it, or more importantly, if it's impossible to pull out. And I only say it like that because, honestly, I am a big believer that a person's individual will, when it comes to their own, especially their own bodies, is of utmost importance. You know, especially once they've reached the age where they can actually make decisions. Informed decisions. Because I do believe that there is an age where you're too young to make any sort of cognizant decision for yourself. But, you know, what if someone gets an implant? We realize the implant is detrimental to the overall health of whatever socioeconomic, whatever, you know, even to the body itself. What if it's harmful to the body itself? And then, but the person who has it doesn't want to get rid of it because it gives them some perceived advantage in exchange for the disadvantage. And more importantly, what if removing it causes more damage than leaving it in? And these are all things we're going to have to consider. And they're not light. They're not light at all. I never realized the glow was the reflection on the back from the glow from the sword. For some reason, I always thought that was the armor. Okay, I'm going to stop rambling. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe down below. We are on the road to 13 million subscribers, one subscription at a time, so make sure you subscribe. Guys, thank you for jumping down this rabbit hole with me. I really appreciate it. You all have a wonderful night.